Hi, I'm Andy Brandt. As an entrepreneur, and especially a startup founder, you have surely heard of Lean and Agile already. Those words are frequently encountered when you go to meetups or conferences, and especially when you talk about software and software development. In this presentation, I will explain what they mean, and especially what they mean for you. Why it matters that the team that you will work with uses those practices. Of course, the first of those is the Agile itself. So Agile itself has its meaning as a word, and it means being nimble and adaptable. But also recently, Agile has become a name for a whole movement that changed, or is still changing, the way in which software development is approached. And this movement includes many different methods, methodologies and practices. Now luckily this movement not only has a name, but it also has a foundational document. And that document is the so-called Agile Manifesto, which was published in 2001. That's when it all started, by the way. So as you can see, Agile has been with us for about 13 years now. Now, why it matters? Because the Agile Manifesto still to this very day is a touchstone for agility. So in other words, if you meet an Agile team, or if a company claims that their services are being provided in an Agile way, or there is a method that calls itself Agile, or a framework, or a practice, you can always check whether it aligns with the principles of the manifesto or not. And it's actually a very good thing to do. Now, what's in the manifesto itself? There are 4 main principles: individual interactions over process tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. If you look at those principles from an angle of someone who is having an idea, you have an idea and you want it built, and you will be working with a software development team. So if a team claims to be agile, they should be focusing hard on working software. Now, one of the principles of the manifesto is that the working software is the only measure of progress, meaning all agile teams should be able to deliver frequently, and they should be able to deliver software that can be used, because only software that is fully finished and usable delivers any value. Everything else is secondary. They should also be very open to collaboration. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation is one of the central principles of Manifesto. It basically says that it's much more important to work with the client, which is probably you, very closely throughout the development, rather than build barriers like spec documents and extends agreements between the developers and the actual client. Responding to change over following a plan is very important, because a team like that should be very open to change. And by being very open, I mean that they should be not only willing to change, but they also should be able to change the development and change the process to adapt to your new requirements. So the idea is that if you have new requirements, then they might have to wait a bit, but once their time has come, the team will be happy to implement them, even if you changed them pretty recently. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, which is the first principle here, is basically an observation that it matters much more who you are working with and how they relate to one another, how they act as a team. That's much more important than any processes or tools that they might be using. And by tools, we understand all the support tools like Visual Studio, but also project management tools, etc. And by processes, we mean all the frameworks that describe how the process of software development should be structured. Though all those are secondary to what the quality of people is and what the quality of the team is that you will be working with. So if you are working with an Agile team, please read it and consider whether they really align with those principles. Now, there are also 12 secondary principles, and you can read them for yourself on www.agilemanifesto.org. It's a very short document, very short web page, so I urge you to go there and have a look. Now, Agile describes a whole cloud of practices and methods and methodologies. I divide them roughly into 2 groups. One group is the so-called managerial practices, or managerial frameworks, which basically are about managing the process. And they describe how the teams should be organized, how the work should be organized, basically how it should be organized that requirements coming in are turned into software coming out. And the most popular of those is obviously Scrum, that you, I'm sure, heard of already. There are others like DSDM or Crystal that are less popular, but nonetheless agile. And the second group are the so-called, or what I call them, technical practices. Now, technical practices focus on how the code is written or how the programmers really work. And they can range from stuff like pair programming, which is part of XP, extreme programming on this slide, to things like test-driven development, which is roughly an idea that you first write automatic tests for your code and only then the functional code itself. And it has certain benefits. Now, what's important from your point of view is that a good agile team will be using a couple of those together, because technical practices and process methodologies or managerial practices, they complement each other. In other words, it's not enough for a team to produce good quality software in an agile way to just use Scrum or to just use TDD. They should probably use both and a couple of other practices along with them. So it's pretty good to have a discussion with your team and make sure that they understand that, and make sure that they use something more than just I don't know, Scrum. I mentioned Scrum because it's currently the most popular of those frameworks, and I think, by the way, probably the most useful for startups at the beginning when you are developing lots of new functionality into your product. One thing, however, is common to all the methods that call themselves agile, and especially the process methods or managerial practices. They are all iterative and incremental. And that means that software is developed in short cycles. With some of those methods, the cycles might be days, with some of them it might be weeks, no more than a month though. And at the end of every iteration, you will get an increment or a new version of your software, which is just changed since the last time you received a version by adding new features or functionalities as you ask. So this is incremental. So with every iteration, you get a new version that is incrementally getting bigger, better, more useful for your clients, users, whoever. Iterative and incremental. That's the key of Agile. And again, turning that into your work with your software development team, you should expect to get frequent releases of production quality software as a result of the development process that they use. Okay, so another word that you might have heard is lean. Now, lean is like a neighboring cloud, and the Toyota logo here is for a purpose, and that's because it all started in manufacturing. Now, lean is more oriented towards the paradigm of a factory, if you like, because of its roots. It started with optimizing the assembly lines at car manufacturers, especially Toyota. They were very good at that. The lean as a word describing this kind of approach started its life in '98, so it's more or less the same time as Agile, and it was popularized by a book called or titled The Toyota Way, which was published in 2004. So what is lean all about? Well, the three principles behind lean are optimizing flow, reducing waste, and improving quality. By optimizing flow, we understand optimizing flow throughout the system, reducing waste, that's self-explanatory, and focusing on quality. So avoiding so-called rework, or avoiding to having to work on something that we already considered finished. Now, in the context of a software development, by optimizing flow, we understand the optimizing the flow of work from requirement stage to done stage. And by reducing waste, we understand focusing on not building artifacts that are not necessarily needed, like, for example, extensive functional documentation. And by improving quality, we obviously understand fighting with so-called bugs, but we also understand keeping the internal quality of the software good to preserve future maintainability and extensibility. Now, there is hope backed by experiential evidence that by focusing on those principles with your team, you will get something that is called Kaizen from Japanese, constant never-ending improvement. So the idea is that in a Kanban system or in a lean system, I jumped ahead of myself, but the idea is that in a system that is lean, you optimize those three things, flow, waste, and quality, and you have to do it constantly over and over again. And that instills in the team a culture of self-improvement throughout their work. Now, Kanban, I mentioned that already. Kanban method is a method that applies Lean principles to software development. And it was developed by David J. Anderson, and then he published a book under the same title, the Kanban method. Now the Kanban method is, in my little classification, that's just a managerial practice or a process method or a process framework. It doesn't say anything about software specifically or how it should be built, etc. It just focuses on the process. However, it contains a very strong focus on quality. So this is Kanban. I mention it here because it's currently, I think, after Scrum, the second most popular Agile method. It is considered part of the Agile cloud as well. It is on this fuzzy border between Lean and Agile. So you might work with a team that is working Kanban, and it's not inferior or in any way worse than a team that works in Scrum, for example. However, there are some subtle differences in how you will interact with them. Now, one thing that I want to mention is that there is something happening, in a sense, above those two clouds. And the reason for that is that it was found out through experience that the traditional models of management, namely hierarchical structures, command and control, huge structures, etc., all of that just doesn't work with Agile. And what is coming now, I think, is something that I call the new wave of management. Two influential books, which are worth mentioning: Management 3.0 by Jürgen Appelow, Radical Management by Stephen Deming. There is Stolz there. Stolz is a movement that tried unsuccessfully so far to replicate the phenomena of the Agile Manifesto, but it's roughly a movement of people of goodwill who want to change the way we manage people, we manage work in our organizations. And I think it's an important development. So you have another cloud right now kind of forming on top of the other two, when it was realized that we need different management for Agile and Lean to work. By the way, that different management is also different, is linked to a different culture. So when talking to a team, you might want to have a look and observe how the team leader interacts with his team. Is he bossy? Is she commanding people or telling them what to do? Or is that person rather delegating problems to the team and helping the team in resolving them? It's a very different approach, and you will be much better off with the second one. Now, the purpose of all those clouds is to deliver something that is called business agility. It wasn't so openly stated back in 2001 when the Agile Manifesto was formed. The aims of the Agile Manifesto founders was mostly to improve just the profession of software development. But it turned out this is very useful because this kind of approach should lead to business agility. And business agility is a term that is right now being frequently talked about. It's something that is talked about on conferences and meetups by agilists or people connected to that movement. However, one thing that I'm suggesting is that what those frameworks, those methods, if you use them, deliver you, is just potential business agility. Why it's just potential? Because essentially what Agile and Lean will give you with proper management is that you will get frequent releases of very good quality software or a very good quality product. Now you have to understand how can you use that. And I think the biggest problem many entrepreneurs have, especially ones who have corporate backgrounds, is that you have to abandon the predictive model, which means you cannot expect that you will write a lengthy spec, hand it over to a team, and will get anything that will resemble something that you envisioned in your mind for your startup or your product. So you have to be constantly working with that team, ensuring that whatever they build is what you want. But you can take it much farther, because your idea about what the market wants is just your idea. And those approaches and frequent releases of production quality software give you an opportunity to actually test your assumptions. And now this is where Lean Startup comes into place. And Lean Startup is basically a method to leverage Agile and Lean approaches in the realm of software development or product development, actually. And the way Lean Startup works is very simple. So the idea is you have what is your vision of the product is actually a certain hypothesis about what the market wants, and you want to test it with as little risk and cost as possible. So the idea is to build a smaller subset of the functions or ideas that you have, push it onto the market and see how your users, clients react. And then based on that feedback, either proceed further or pull back and try something else. I very much recommend you read this book before you engage in actually building a startup. It's a bit too long for my taste, and it doesn't contain really anything revolutionary new. But what Eric did, he packaged it as a framework that can be easily understood and can be learned. And I think it will help you greatly. So, to sum it all up, the Agile and Lean are two clouds of methods and practices that, if applied properly, will give you a development team, be it in-house or outsourced, that can deliver in short intervals, very frequently, good quality software, and is very adaptable to change and will work very closely with you. Now it's up to you to use that well for your startup and succeed, which of course is my wish for you and your idea. If you have any questions, or if you would like any advice how to work with a team or build a team for your startup, feel free to contact me. Thank you so much. I hope it was useful.